Konnichiwa.
Welcome to the Jandals in Japan podcast.
Kia ora, Catherine.
Konnichiwa, Jane.
Autumn is here and we are happy.
We are happy. The sultry summer has finally disappeared.
Hooray for that.
We're cold climate people, aren't we really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm happy, but my body is still adjusting. So, yeah, it's feeling cold. It's only 14 degrees or something. So, we're coming down from 34 to 14 is a big
It's pretty
jump.
chilly, right? It's that blanket goes on top of the bed. The slippers start to come out for the little tootsies. It's kind of
It's a
chilly.
koromogai season. Oh, my God. Changing all the clothes over, etc. But it's also the time for eating and studying, as the Japanese people say. This time of year, lots of different delicious foods come out and people start to buckle down on their studies now that they can concentrate again and their brains are working.
Exactly. What are they studying for? Is it New Year next year for getting into universities and schools? Is that right?
Wow, yes. In sort of January, February next year, it is the big entrance examination season. And so if you have a kid who is going into high school or university, they will be starting to knuckle down and get on with their exam preparations now.
So I guess if people are talking with counterparts and even in business here, they're probably, if they're parents, dealing with this kind of thing with their kids studying. So it's a good topic to talk about, isn't it? I find a lot of people who I know, I'm helping my child study this weekend, I can't do something. And it's quite an intense
The whole
period.
family is involved in this, right? It's not just the kid who is studying. Everything gets put on hold while the kid is focusing on this. So nobody's allowed to have any fun, right? So the rest of the family cancels the New Year festivities and the Christmas events and all of that so that everybody is focused on this one or two kids getting through their test. So, yes.
So the delicious food part helps the study. I know like studying with chocolate on the side is always very helpful, right? But is that kind of where we're going at? Getting nutrition, maybe not from the chocolate, sorry, but from other foods in Japan? Like I know now chestnut something is very delicious for most people. I don't really love it. I'm growing used to it. But it's not one of my favorites. But is there something else that people are eating while they're studying, like typically?
I think at this time of year, if you live in Japan, you will hear the ishiyaki truck going around, which is the stone grilled, baked sweet potatoes truck.
True.
And he goes around and plays a little song, and you think, what on earth is that? It sounds terrible. But it's actually the studying food, and it goes around at night, right? So it's kind of like a late evening snack, about sort of 8 p.m., 9 p.m. for, the studying kids, and probably the parents go out and grab the one from the truck as it goes by.
I hadn't thought that. Yes, it is at night, and you think, well, they're wanting the starch or the stamina or that's warm, right? So it gives you that extra boost probably to get through your last 700 kanji or whatever you need to do. Oh, very interesting. Well, it's so interesting to talk about food because today's episode is also about food.
It
right?
is.
Yeah, today's guest is Lindsay Gray. And we've pulled him out of the Tokyo American Club where he is the executive chef. And we've asked him to come on the show and talk about all things food related. It was so amazing speaking with him. He's such an experienced executive chef. He's doing a lot here with using New Zealand ingredients in food as much as possible. He's serving to celebrities and the average Tokyo American Club member like myself, who is always looked after very well by the food there.
It's
I
good
loved
food
his
there,
motto.
isn't it?
Yeah, your hobby is your job. And I think that comes through in this episode with Lindsay. And we really hope that you enjoy it, because if you're a budding chef and you'd love to come to Japan, he also gives some really good tips on working as a chef over here.
And my voice is terrible in this episode because I was having one of those terrible throat colds where I couldn't speak. Anyway, you will hopefully be able to follow what I'm saying. So that's why my voice is not very good in the following episode. Yeah, let's hear it from Lindsay.
Kia ora, Lindsay. Welcome to the Jandals in Japan podcast. Great to have you on the show today. Oh, kia ora. Thank you. It's my absolute pleasure to join you this morning.
So, Lindsay, we'd like to start with a warm-up question. Tell us about a kind of Japanese food you recommend that is not so well known.
Not so well known. I would have to say it's something that I've kind of struggled with, and I do love all Japanese food, but there is a seaweed dish that kind of has a little bit of a slimy texture to it in Japan. And they also usually marinate it in vinegar. And it's actually on the tip of my tongue. And I'm about to get it very...
Mozuku.
Mozuku, yes. Correct. And I've had it a couple of times. And the first 2 times I had it, I couldn't enjoy it as much as I should have. Maybe that was the preparation. But more recently, I've had it a couple of times and I really loved it. But I do struggle with slimy and sour. But it's a pretty good, healthy, very healthy dish. And not many foreigners know it until you actually come to Japan.
Yeah, that's a good one. Mozuku is what it's called.
Mozuku, yeah.
And I agree. The slimy consistency is very difficult to get used to when you are learning how to enjoy Japanese cuisine. But don't give up, because you too can get used to slimy and sour.
Correct.
Or, all the different various consistencies that we've always been taught are rotten, right? To me, that was always rotten, bad, do not eat. But in Japan, that's not really the case.
Correct, yes. I think there's only a couple of cuisines in the world actually that include slimy in the texture kind of bag of senses. And I think Japan, Turkey, and possibly Italian cuisine are the only ones.
Well, interesting factoid. I did not know that. That's very cool.
Well, I'm feeling a bit like slimy now after hearing all of that. I try to avoid the slimy food. There's not much. Like there's natto, which we all know, and there's some of the potatoes that have been grated really, 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 really minutely, and they go a little bit slimy, right? Imo. So I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to go to renkon, which is one of my favorites, a lotus root. I love the look of it because it's like a flower with holes in it all the way around. I love it fried. I love it in a salad. It's one of my go-tos that I think maybe we don't really eat in New Zealand at all. And it's a real Japanese favorite of mine. And so renkon, lotus root, is what I'm going for.
It's fantastic.
Maybe less common. Maybe some people know it outside of Japan, maybe not so common, but that's my go-to. Jane, are you able to say something that's not slimy?
Well, mine is not slimy, but it was also one of those challenging consistencies that I really struggled with the first few years. But that's mochi. Mochi is so delicious. I love it now, but I could not eat it for the first couple of years. It really challenged me. But there's so many things you can do with mochi. You just have to expand your mochi repertoire. But they come in little bricks that you can buy, like already prepared ones, and they whack one of them in the toaster oven in the morning and turn it on and come back like 3 to 5 minutes later and it's all puffed up. Vegemite and butter on that is the bomb.
Really?
Not shoyu, not soy sauce, Vegemite and butter on the mochi, like baked mochi. For every Kiwi is a bit homesick in Japan, thoroughly recommend that one.
Whoa.
Have to try that someday.
Oh my goodness, someday, but I don't know when. Maybe out in the future. Oh my goodness. Well, you heard it there. Thank you, Jane. And Vegemite, not Marmite. That's interesting you say that.
Not Marmite. Well, we are a Vegemite family, so
true.
You could try Marmite. It would be equally delicious, I'm sure.
Yeah. I'm a Vegemite girl as well. Well, Lindsay Gray, we are so happy to have you on the show here today. You're the executive chef at the Tokyo American Club. We've been waiting to have you come on the show for a while and, talk about your history of working in hospitality in both New Zealand and Japan. We know you studied at AIT in New Zealand. You're going to tell us a bit about that and some of your background there. And when you came to Japan and all bits and pieces there. So we're really glad to have you here. We know that your food motto is your hobby is your job, right? And so we're really looking forward to hearing you talk about your job, which happens to be your hobby, I believe. So welcome again to the Jandals in Japan podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today.
So do tell us then a little bit more about your background, getting into the culinary world. What sparked your interest in food and cooking?
Sure. To kind of put it in some kind of a shell, I grew up in South Auckland. Manurewa High School was my high school I attended. And at point of turning 16 years old and having a little bit of fun when you can at that age, I decided to apply for a position at a culinary school, AIT, on a course which was a very basic cookery course. And usually you are not accepted into these courses. You need to come with some form, whether that even be a year or two of some kind of culinary experience. However, whether I was lucky or timing was correct, they allowed one spot on the course for someone who had no culinary background. And after going to AIT and doing interviews, I managed to successfully take that place on the course. And there started my culinary education from the absolute basics right through to full-time studying culinary for 18 months. So after, somewhat getting halfway through this culinary course, I started to write letters to the executive chefs in Auckland, letting them know who I am, what I had been doing, and what I'd like to do. So the executive chefs of the Sheraton, the Regent Hotel on Albert Street, the Pan Pacific Hotel. So they got letters from me, and lo and behold, 2 or 3 weeks later, I got a phone call from the executive chef at the Regent Hotel, which was back in the 90s, more or less kind of the top hotel in New Zealand. And the position was for a pantry hand. And that was, again, starting out at the bottom, making sandwiches and cutting vegetables and making mayonnaise in 30 liter volumes. And that was, kind of the grounding in the cold kitchen at the Regent Hotel. And, that led on to the chef offering an apprenticeship. And there started my career.
Tell me then, you've come to Japan now. What on earth got you to come to Japan?
So through my time at the Regent, I had met some Japanese friends who were working at the hotel. And I had finished my apprenticeship, and along with friends who I had been to high school with, they were on their OEs to Europe. So on my way to Europe to further myself, I said, why not go to Japan and do a 6 months or a 1 year working holiday visa? And, from the start of it, I really did have a big interest in Japan and Asia, and knew that I was definitely going to love it. However, I didn't realize how much I would love it. And on arriving here, as we all know, our first week in Tokyo in Japan is everything's different, especially in 1995. There wasn't as much English signage. It was a sensory shock, to say the least. But I knew that I was going to enjoy this.
Wow. So you stayed though, right?
I did. So I pretty much went on the mission of trying to find a job with zero Japanese. And I was fortunate to run into a Canadian gentleman who had a little French bistro style restaurant in Nishiazabu. And I started working for him in his little kitchen, doing this and that, while also enjoying Japan. It was a full-time job. However, it afforded me the ability to also enjoy Tokyo without having to work 15, 16-hour days.
Wow, how cool. Is that place still around?
It's not. It's long gone.
Wow, that's a really great way of getting started in the industry here, and just looking at the things that they do in the kitchen. The layout of the kitchen must have been quite different. The little restaurant and people coming in, regulars. You would have got a lot of a feel for how Japanese restaurants, or the way that Japanese like to be served. You would have seen a lot of that going on out of the corner of your eye, yeah?
Yes, just the kitchen, for example. Now, the hard thing is being a foreigner, or perhaps a foreigner with some height in Japan, is they build the kitchens here for people who are probably 160 to 165 centimeters tall in general. So you're always constantly standing with a little bit of a bend in your lower back. And I think if you talk to enough foreign chefs, they'll tell you that if they were to be able to change one thing in this country, it'd be to design industrial kitchens where they're either just so slightly larger in size of working bench and stove height and etc. So that was the first. But you're right, you slowly learn the Japanese palate is a lot lighter. They don't appreciate strong flavors right in your face straight away, and probably more so on a salt level as well. I think foreigners, we tend to really well season our food. Now, this is back in the 90s. So, I mean, back in the 90s was a little bit different even compared to now in 2024, where seasoning was a little bit more heavy-handed. These days, I think the Western palate's starting to get a little bit closer to Japanese per se in that regards. We're a little bit more conscientious about salt. But back then, it was probably a little bit more evident that, we need to be a little bit careful with the salt here.
Wow. Yeah, I know Japan, to me, what the surprising thing is the amount of sugar and sweetness that is secretly hiding in a lot of foods. That really surprises me.
Yes, that is true, yeah.
Well, now you've gone from Nishiazabu and a little bistro to being the executive chef at the Tokyo American Club.
Yes.
Secretly, I really love that you're a Kiwi hanging around the Tokyo American Club. And it's so lovely. I don't know. I must have a GPS because whenever I go into the club, you end up coming out and finding me and we have a bit of a chit chat. And I love it. I love that you're there and I love introducing you to a lot of the members there. And especially if they're Kiwis, I love introducing you to them. So tell us about how you got into the Tokyo American Club.
I'd already been in Japan for more than a few years. And I had really, out of the blue, a letter arrive, and it was an old friend, very dear friend, who we'd kind of lost contact with over a few years. So I had this letter saying, hey, call me, let's meet up. I'm in Japan now working here. So that led to a meeting. And I had realized that a couple of my senpais from the Regent Hotel were now here in Tokyo. Both of them were working at the Tokyo American Club. One had come over from New Zealand and was employed as the executive chef. And my other friend who had sent the letter was his sous chef here at the club. And we engaged in a conversation on what would be the possibilities of me joining them to help with some banqueting work and a change in culinary direction that the executive chef wanted to take at that time.
So hang on a minute. The executive chef at the Tokyo American Club then was already a Kiwi?
Yes, well, he's an Englishman.
English. We'll give him Kiwi-ish to that Englishness, right?
Yes. Spent enough time in New Zealand, in Auckland, New Zealand.
And also, the sous chef was?
Originally Hong Kong born, however, lived in New Zealand for more than 20 years.
How interesting that was attractive to the club, that they admired, obviously, the region and that experience there and brought in people from New Zealand to the Tokyo American Club. What year is that?
Oh, this is 2003-04.
That's really exciting. So you ended up being in the banqueting department. What happened then? You must have had a little few challenges perhaps, or some exciting opportunities came up while you were there getting ensconced into the club.
Yes, it was an exciting time. This was back in the older Zabudai Club. And more than anything, it's really large volume banqueting. So this was at a time of change, kind of moving the banqueting from a very classical kind of on silverware canapé style of banqueting food to more of a modern presentation. Chinaware, new Chinaware was purchased, new banqueting lines were purchased. It was a massive move from old school classical banqueting food to more of a this is the early 2000s. We need to catch up with the times, so to speak. It was a big move, and the chef was pretty brave in going in that direction, and it was a large investment in many regards.
Yeah. So what's it like for you now on a typical day at the club? I mean, I see you, and I know you add into there going to see Catherine, sitting down, having a coffee. But aside from that, what is happening for you? Because you must be having long days, either mornings, breaks, and then evenings. Tell us a little bit about that.
Definitely, I do have some long days, no doubt. I try my best. I have a little 5-year-old daughter as well, so I try to kind of balance as much as I can to have some days where I'm not doing a long whole day and spend some time with her in the evenings or early mornings. And I guess with a kitchen size of having 70 plus chefs, 25 plus stewards to manage, there can be some stuff that's, checking protocols and coming in and checking boxes, so to speak. But I do try to have a mindset of trying to make every day as unique as I can, because if you don't do that, then you really are just checking boxes.
Wow, yes.
And I have some days where I feel I'm really successful at doing that. And some days where you have the day planned out and nothing goes to plan. You leave with more stuff on your plate than you arrived with.
Literally.
Literally, yes. The club is a very dynamic place in Tokyo. And in the space of a few days, I can do anything from an authentic Indian cuisine buffet for 350 people, right up to a authentic Jewish New Year celebration for 150, through, again, a special course dinner with special requirements for another group of people, all within the matter of a few days. So it's extremely dynamic.
Wow. Just wow.
Yeah, just wow. How do you know all this kind of food? How do you know the varieties? If you've got amongst those 70 chefs, there must be people with some talents that you pull in on.
There is. And without that, the job would never get done and started. So I'm extremely lucky to have some talented chefs with me, but also on the diversity and aspect of it, it really does require sometimes a lot of self-learning as well. And, if I talk about, let me just throw something out there, a Mexican event we've started to do every year. We usually do it in November now. It's a Day of the Dead event, and it's for the membership. And we do for that event a mole negro. Now, this is a kind of Mexican stew using different types of dried peppers and chilies. And there's about 25 ingredients in this stew. From start to finish, it'll take 5 to 7 days to make. Now, this is sometimes a learning process by taking a recipe and trying it out and testing it a few times. But as you can imagine, testing something that takes a week to make can take a lot of background work as well. Mm-hmm. And these are the kind of projects here at the club that I think have kept me here for as long as I have been here, because you never stop learning. But also there's a standard part of the club where you're here to kind of like more or less protect. We have some dishes and recipes here that we won't take off the menus because they're an identity of the club.
Is it like the United Nations in your kitchen? It must be. All the problems that come along with all the different nationalities and all of that trying to work together.
Yeah, you got it. You do have to manage people, and people come to work with emotions sometimes. Everyone has something going on in their lives, and hopefully we have everyone come and be as professional as they can. But unfortunately, human nature is such that when the kitchen gets hot, it's hard to stay calm sometimes. So I can have some weeks that are pretty intense on a human level, and I only hope that I'm getting a little bit better at managing that. Yes.
But on that point, there must be some tips you've got there for maybe someone who's looking to work in the food industry in Japan. What sort of things do you think would be your tips for success here in that industry?
Without a doubt, whether it's a kitchen or not, you need perseverance. And you need to have the ability to not always go at your pace. Some people want to learn really quickly, but in Japan, as we know, there's a process to learning. And specifically in a kitchen, especially with a 20-year-old young chef, they're ready to go to the next step, but the person teaching them is not ready to let them go to that next step. So if you have the ability to be able to understand that and proceed at someone else's pace, is a lot easier to do better, I believe, in Japan than wanting just to go absolutely full guns out. Obviously, I having the ability to learn a second language too is really important. And I probably say that from a point of view of having an interest in Japan in general. If you have a genuine interest in Japan to start with, it makes all the bumps in the road ahead so much more easier.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. How about, I think before we talked today, you mentioned respect as one of the other tips that you had.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I think like an open-mindedness is something else you also mentioned. How do they kind of show up in your work?
Respect is something that's extremely important, probably more so in Japan. And I say that also too from a perspective of Japan's an aging society. So the chances are that you're working with someone much older than you, I think, is greater in Japan than it is from, let's say, working in Europe, perhaps, or somewhere else in Southeast Asia. But in Japan, the chances are that you're working with staff who are older than you is greater. So having the respect and open-mindedness to also get what you need to get done, but also not tread on their perspective and way of doing things that has been done for the last 40, 50, 60 years.
I would love to know, who are some of the highlight people that you've cooked for?
Okay, so there's a few that I can't mention.
Have some name drop that you can name names on.
Okay, well, we've had some pretty high-ranking American military people come through the club as well. 4-star generals, 5-star generals, and the likes. We've also had a lot of Japanese royalty come through the club as well, from princesses to princes and cousins of the emperor and empress. And every now and then we'll have a rock star come in. We've had recently as kind of like a special guitar solo by the guitarist from Megadeth, Marty Friedman, who's a very long-term famous guitarist here in Japan.
Any sporty kind of people? We love sporty people. Yeah.
Well, on a private note, before the club, I've done some private catering for some pretty high-level Japanese sport personalities. Hideki Matsui from the Tokyo Giants.
Wow. Wow.
Was a private dinner at his house in Ginza a few years back. We've been lucky enough to have some really famous All Blacks. You may have heard of Richie McCaw, but he was at the club
nice.
On a couple of occasions.
You forgot to ring me on that one, Lindsay.
I did. I was too busy.
You were. It's okay. Fantastic. Well, what are you seeing coming up on the horizon? Any sort of trends in the culinary world? Anything you're seeing in Japan that's emerging in foods and bev?
Oh, I'm going to be really honest here. I love Japanese food, and I love getting out on a day off and trying to go and find somewhere new. Now, as I had mentioned before, I do have a 5-year-old. So there's limitations to where I can go, but I love to listen to other chefs. I'd love to go and try places as well. Now, we recently had Chef Michael Anthony from the Gramercy Tavern in New York, which is perhaps one of the more famous restaurants in New York, if not the whole of the United States, here for a collaboration celebrity chef event in July. And he had a great restaurant that he wanted to go and try because the perception of this restaurant was it had a connection to what he was doing back in New York. And that was Tanakada in Minami Aoyama. And so that's on my radar. And the reason why I speak of Tanakada is it's a restaurant that focuses on quality of ingredients done really simply in a Japanese style, but the warmth of the restaurant and authenticity and simplicity to the restaurant is kind of one of the hallmarks of their style. And that's something that I feel whether we are in Japan or overseas, that removing ingredients and just getting down to the quality of the ingredient at hand and using a light hand to help it along so you can enjoy it at its best quality is something that I really enjoy. But also I see in general something where that is a direction where I feel we will go in the future. Because also the dilemma is there's just not enough people in the industry to have hands doing all kinds of complicated sauces and preparations that you need to really focus on the quality of the main ingredient.
I'm so glad to hear that, because sometimes things seem so fussy. Is that the right word? Yes. It's like foaming on this and gold flake on that. And it feels a little bit over the top. And I really love that you're talking about getting back to basics, and that basics doesn't have to be boring. It's simply bringing out the best of the very immediate ingredients that you need for something to be, as you say, authentic, having simplicity, but bringing out some authentic Japanese flavors. I love that.
Yeah. And one of the cuisines I've always really loved, and when I have a friend or family come to Japan, I will always take them to yakitori. And the reason why I say that is, of course, there's yakitori joints in New Zealand and America, anywhere in the world. But the way the Japanese do yakitori in Japan, with the quality of chicken, the quality of charcoal, the quality of the equipment, and everything else that goes with that, I find to be just
bellissimo.
Bellissimo. It's fantastic. It's amazing, because you can go and spend hundreds of thousands of yen or thousands of dollars at a high-end sushi restaurant anywhere in the world, and the fish will be from Toyosu and made by a Japanese sushi chef. But I think on a yakitori level, in my experience, that's the one Japanese cuisine where when you leave Japan, you cannot get the same quality.
Oh, I love it. What's your favorite yakitori place in Tokyo? I'll share you mine.
I have one, and it's very quaint, and it's been there forever. Torigin in Ginza.
Torigin. Okay.
And they share a sister restaurant called New Torigin.
New Torigin. That's original. That's original.
Yeah. It's in a little alleyway off Harumidori in Ginza.
Fantastic. Can we tell them Lindsay sent us?
You can. I don't know if they're giving you any discounts, but
no, just they look after you. We're not after discounts. My fave is Kushimura, which is in Roppongi. It used to be a smoking yakitori, but it's all gone smoke free. And I've taken people there, and they love it, because it's, if you get a counter seki, a counter seat, it's really fantastic. I love it. I really recommend that place too. Yeah, Lindsay, we've got so much. I'm getting very hungry listening to you and talking with you. How do you continue to stay inspired? You've been at the club a long time. What keeps you going in this dynamic industry?
As you mentioned right off the bat, my job is my hobby. And I say that where I, obviously I have days when I'm working and days when I'm, somewhat unplugged from the club. As the executive chef, it can be extremely hard to be unplugged, because even on a day off, you have people calling, vendors with questions. It's endless. However, I love cooking at home as well. I love cooking for my little 5-year-old and my wife, and we have some enjoyable home meals as well. But staying inspired is a part of the job, and kind of going back to the more is less concept. These days, it's about, for me, finding great ingredients and then working with my chef to say, how can we implement this into this menu or this concept to take advantage of its qualities and use it to its best ability. And for me, being in Japan is, as we all know, we're in a country where the respect for quality ingredients and vegetables and fruits and seafood and proteins is really, really high on a world stage. So I consider myself just extremely lucky to be here in that regards.
Fabulous, fabulous. So Lindsay, you are a Kiwi, you're in Japan. It must be very hard to forget that you're a Kiwi. So how do you bring in your Kiwiness into the menus?
So being here at the club, obviously we do have a strong connection with America and American cuisine. But every now and then I'm extremely lucky to be able to put together a great menu for a New Zealand winery or perhaps a New Zealand corporate event. And that's when we go to town with the manuka honey and the kumara, the green lip mussels, lamb shoulder, lamb leg, lamb chops, scampi, and all the ingredients that we kind of take for granted in New Zealand because, again, like Japan, New Zealand's a country that just has some absolute divine ingredients. And I love putting that together on those occasions. So people can say, oh, wow, we're in Tokyo, but this is New Zealand food using those great ingredients.
Yeah, now you're talking. That's fantastic. Well, absolutely fabulous. Jane, did you have anything you wanted to ask just at the end here before we wrap up?
I was just thinking, wow, someone might be listening to this and thinking, I want to launch my chefing career. I want to go to Japan and learn all I can. Are you taking on people at the American Club these days, or?
Well, as you know, with the visa process, it's not impossible, but it is doable. If any young chefs in New Zealand were thinking of that, I'd say first, before your culinary career, come to Japan for a year on a working holiday visa and see if you love Japan first, because it's not for everyone. You know, it changes quite quickly as well, but it also has some parts where change takes a long time. So I would say, even if it's for 3 months, come to Tokyo. Don't even worry about working, just enjoy Japan. And then from there, you could go back, you could make an educated decision to say, I really did love those 3 months. Let's do it for a year, come back for a year. And the chances are that you're going to find a pretty good workplace in an industry here that is just absolutely struggling to find staff is pretty high. You're gonna have opportunity here. And then you go from there. You know, no need to think too far down the line. Come and see if Japan is for you first.
Great advice. I think we just heard there, Catherine.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, experience it. And Japan may have different, I don't know, visions or thoughts in your mind of what it is like. But when you come here, it can be quite different, or it could be even better than you thought you had in your mind. So I love that advice. Absolutely excellent.
Great.
Well, thank you, Lindsay. We've thoroughly enjoyed talking with you today. I know I'm super hungry. I'm going to have to find some. I'm not going to be able to get the green lip mussels, but I might be able to go and have a manuka drink. And maybe Jane should be doing that too as she repairs herself, coming through from our previous few weeks of having a bit of a rough ride on the old throat there, Jane. Looking forward to hearing you come back. Manuka honey.
Ginger and lemon,
Ginger and lemon. All right, you heard it here first. Thanks so much, Lindsay. And, of course, you are now a jandal in Japan. We've enjoyed talking with you. Thanks again.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time as well.
I'm feeling very hungry.
Me too.
All of the talk of that food, and especially because I am imagining in my brain the taste of the carrot cake at the Tokyo American Club. When I was there last time, I thoroughly enjoyed it, but I was certain there was alcohol in it, and I felt myself getting drunk on the alcohol that I was certain was in the cake, but then we asked and there was none. So I don't know what was going on with me.
I think technically correct. There is none in the cake. There is alcohol in the sauce that goes over the cake.
Oh, really? Okay,
yes.
Well, that was why I was feeling a bit woo. So surely I'm not making this up. Like it's like a placebo.
You are right. So sometimes people put it on the side or say no sauce, but it's so good with the sauce. Or I forgot the right word. Sauce might not be the right
icing
word.
Or
icing.
I don't know.
It's drizzled over.
Frosting or something.
Frosting, yeah. It's certainly a bit diabolical, but it's the most amazing cake. Honestly, if you're going to have a carrot cake in Tokyo, because
that's not easy to find a carrot cake in Tokyo, is it?
Yeah, not a way, not at all, not like that. So if you're hearing this, here's my gift to you. Hit me up and come and come and sit with me at the Tokyo American Club, and I will let you have some of this cake, and you will just love it. You'll want to come back. Yeah, and as well as that, I think Lindsay full of gems sprinkled across there. And if you're really, coming to Japan and want to work here, you got it right with Lindsay, didn't you? And I think just his approach, this perseverance, he said respect for other members in his team. He's got such a global team there. You can look through the window and see them all working when you're in the restaurant, and totally different nationalities just by looks, okay? But if we're judging on that, you see lots of people, but also within that, many different kinds of people working there. And I can see how he mentioned about pacing yourself for working with people and adjusting, like moving that scale to adjust to other people, and their learning pace may not be as fast as yours.
Yeah, and they might not want to teach you as fast as you want to learn.
Oh, yes.
You might have to slow it down a bit and learn it a bit more deeply before you're allowed to go on to the next level, even though you think you already know everything and you're ready for the next step.
Exactly.
You're not.
Process of learning for everybody is very different, and I think that came out very clearly, and it's certainly important to understand that in the business world in Japan, probably every other country, but I think especially here, because people might be teach me very fast, or I want to take this slowly. And that brought into that other point of his about open-mindedness. He mentioned that very clearly too, just to be the things that might come up that you're not really ready for, just to be open-minded about all kinds of things that could come up in your workplace. I don't know how he keeps it calm and cool, and he just does. Every time I see him, he stops by for a chat, and I know he's got a million things going on that he has to attend to, but he takes the time. So that personality and that approach to looking after people in the club, I think is how
That's fantastic.
I think is a way of making him successful. Thank you so much, Lindsay.
Thank you, Lindsay. It was great to hear from you and your slice of life here in Japan.
Slice of cake life in Japan.
Yeah. I need some cake. All right. More episodes coming soon. Stay tuned. That's all for today. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening. Make sure you check out our guests' links in the show notes.
This podcast is brought to you today by Catherine O'Connell Law and Pod Launch with Jane. If you have a great story you think should be on the show, come and find us on LinkedIn or Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time.
Mata ne!